It was a cloudy October morning in 2024 when technicians from the National Institute of Astrophysics, Optics, and Electronics arrived at the Tonantzintla National Astrophysical Observatory. They were there to perform scheduled major maintenance on the historic Schmidt telescope. Engineer Raul Dominguez and his team had worked on this telescope dozens of times, but they had never had to completely dismantle the rear instrumentation panel. It was a delicate task, requiring millimeter precision to avoid damaging the optical systems that had been in operation since 1942. As he removed the structure's third panel, Dominguez noticed something strange. Tucked behind the old cables and connections was a compartment that didn't appear on any of the telescope's blueprints. It was a rectangular cavity, clearly manufactured with purpose, not a construction flaw. Inside, meticulously wrapped in several layers of industrial plastic and hermetically sealed bags, lay a dark brown, hardcover notebook. The journal belonged to Dr. Eduardo Mendoza Villareal, one of the most brilliant astrophysicists Mexico had ever produced, who had supposedly fled the country in 1992 after an embezzlement scandal. But the 147 pages filled with hurried yet legible handwriting told a radically different story. The last entry, dated September 25, 1992 at 3:00 a.m., contained a sentence that would chill the blood of any astronomer. "They are coming for us. The WOWMX92 signal is real. If you find this, know that we did not flee, we were silenced for knowing too much." The journal included precise celestial coordinates, detailed hand-drawn spectrograms, and physics equations that seemed decades ahead of their time. And something more disturbing, a list titled The Silenced, with 9 names, all scientists from the Tonantzintla Observatory. Tucked between the final pages, held by yellowed adhesive tape, were Polaroid photos of the 9 researchers, apparently taken just hours before their disappearance. The images showed them working feverishly at their stations, surrounded by radio equipment and computer screens, completely oblivious to the fate that awaited them. This journal, hidden for 32 years in the heart of the very telescope that captured the impossible, not only documented the fate of 9 brilliant minds who reached for the cosmos and found an answer, it exposed how the greatest discovery in human history was suppressed by forces who decided humanity was not ready to know we are not alone, and that those who insisted on sharing the truth were erased, just like the stars they watched. If you believe in extraterrestrial life or are familiar with conspiracy theories about alien contact, this story will confirm your suspicions. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because what this journal reveals about a government cover-up will leave you breathless. Hit the like button to demand cosmic transparency. In 1992, the Tonantzintla National Astrophysical Observatory was a jewel of Mexican astronomy, shining brightly since its inauguration in 1942. Strategically located on the slopes of Popocatépetl, 2,150 meters above sea level, the site offered nearly perfect dark skies for astronomical observation, far from the light pollution of the cities. The Schmidt telescope, with its 1-meter diameter mirror, had witnessed monumental discoveries: distant supernovae, wandering comets, and potentially hazardous asteroids. But in 1992, under a cloak of absolute secrecy, a select group of Mexican scientists had reconfigured it to search for something far more extraordinary: signals of extraterrestrial intelligence. Project Quetzal, an acronym for Quiet Universal Extraterrestrial Zone Analysis and Listening, was born of national pride and ambition. Funded discreetly by government budgets funneled through Connecticut and supplemented by anonymous benefactors, whom Mendoza's journal suggests were Mexican entrepreneurs with aerospace interests. The project was Mexico's attempt to enter the exclusive club of alien signal hunters. Officially, the team was studying pulsars and conventional radio-astronomical phenomena. Unofficially, they had modified the Schmidt telescope with ultra-sensitive radio receivers and signal processing systems that rivaled those at Arecibo. Mexico wanted its piece of the cosmic pie before world powers monopolized any potential contact. The 9 who disappeared represented the elite of their generation in Mexican astronomy. Dr. Eduardo Mendoza Villareal, 54, led the project with impeccable credentials. He held a doctorate from Caltech, had discovered 3 supernovae, and authored over 100 papers in peer-reviewed journals. A widower for 5 years, he practically lived at the observatory, dedicating every waking moment to scrutinizing the cosmos. His only daughter, Alejandra, was studying medicine at UNAM and was his sole real link to the world below. Dr. Carmen Espinoza Gutierrez, 42, was the team's lead radio astronomer and a SETI specialist. She had been the first Mexican woman to earn a PhD in astronomy from Cambridge University, breaking barriers of both gender and nationality. Divorced after a marriage that couldn't survive her obsession with the stars, Espinoza was known for her analytical brilliance and her ability to detect patterns where others only saw cosmic noise. Dr. Miguel Ángel Herrera, 38, completed the lead scientific triumvirate as the signal processing expert. He was a mathematical genius who had developed his own algorithms for decoding complex transmissions, capable of deciphering patterns in data that seemed completely random. His previous work with encrypted satellite communications made him the perfect candidate to analyze potential extraterrestrial messages. The technical team included engineer Roberto Salinas, 35, responsible for maintaining and calibrating the radio receivers, secretly added to the Schmidt. Engineer Patricia Lopez, 29, was the systems programmer who had written the real-time analysis software. Dr. Andres Jimenez, 31, a theoretical physicist from UNAM's Institute of Physics, provided the conceptual framework for understanding phenomena that defied known physics. The research assistants completed the group. Maria Elena Rojas, 28, a doctoral student who split her time between her thesis on star formation and analyzing data for Quetzal. Jose Luis Hernandez, 30, the night telescope operator with an almost supernatural ability to keep the equipment running in optimal conditions. And Diana Martinez, 32, a data analyst who had left a well-paying job in the private sector for the chance to participate in the search for extraterrestrial life. They were the perfect group for the perfect project, and for the perfect disappearance. All had security clearance. None had extensive family who would ask too many questions. Several had sacrificed marriages and personal relationships on the altar of science. They lived at the observatory, sleeping on cots in their offices, eating in the small cafeteria, breathing the thin mountain air and their cosmic dreams. No one would miss them immediately if they vanished, and that, as Mendoza's journal would reveal, was not a coincidence. It was by design. September 15, 1992, began like any other night of observation at Tonantzintla. Mendoza's journal meticulously records the routine. Equipment calibration at 2000 hours, systems check at 2100, start of scheduled observations at 2200. The sky was particularly clear that night, with exceptional atmospheric transparency allowing for superior quality observations. But at 2:47 a.m., as Dr. Carmen Espinoza monitored the radio frequencies assigned to the project, something extraordinary appeared on her screens. This signal was unlike anything they had ever detected. It wasn't the regular pulse of a pulsar, the chaotic emission of a quasar, or the terrestrial interference that had so often given them false hope. This signal had structure. It had clear mathematical modulation. It had unmistakable intent. It was coming from the Gliese 667c system, 23.6 light-years away in the constellation Scorpius, a triple-star system with confirmed planets in the habitable zone. The initial sequence was elegant in its simplicity, prime numbers from 2 to 97, then the first 50 digits of pi, followed by Euler's number, the golden ratio, and other universal mathematical constants. It was the perfect greeting, a cosmic hello that any technological civilization would recognize. The signal lasted for exactly 72 seconds and repeated every 6 hours with atomic precision. For the next 2 days, the team worked feverishly to verify the signal's authenticity. They systematically eliminated all possible sources of terrestrial interference: satellites, airplanes, commercial radio broadcasts, even the cafeteria's microwave ovens. Herrera applied all his decoding algorithms, searching for deeper layers of information. And he found them. On September 17th, Herrera made the discovery that would change everything. The signal contained compressed information using an encoding method that did not exist on Earth. By applying mathematical transforms suggested by the signal's own patterns, complex data packets emerged. Mendoza's journal describes the team's disbelief as they watched what appeared to be schematic diagrams of incomprehensible technology, physics equations that transcended the standard model, and diagrams of what could be propulsion systems that violated the known laws of thermodynamics. On September 19th, after 4 days of intensive analysis, Mendoza made the most important decision of his life. He gathered the entire team and proposed a response protocol. They knew they were violating all international SETI protocols, which required immediate notification to the International Astronomical Union and relevant authorities. But they also knew that if they did, Mexico would lose control of the discovery. Larger powers would take over, and the nation that made contact would be relegated to a footnote in history. The team designed a careful response: basic information about Earth, its location in the galaxy, the composition of its atmosphere, the structure of human DNA, and samples of Mexican music and art, including recordings of pre-Hispanic music and fragments of the Popol Vuh translated into binary code. They transmitted it using the Schmitz-modified radio telescope at maximum power. The reply came in just 4 hours. This was physically impossible given the 23.6 light-year distance, suggesting either faster-than-light communication technology or the presence of relays much closer, perhaps within the solar system itself. The new signal was, unequivocally, a personalized response. It mentioned specific details from the Mexican transmission. Included greetings in 7 terrestrial languages, including Mexican Spanish with correct idioms, and, most disturbingly, contained warnings. The partially decoded message warned that the communication must remain secret, that others were monitoring interstellar communications, and that humanity was not ready for open contact. It mentioned a gradual disclosure protocol that had been violated, and consequences for civilizations that broke the silence prematurely. But it also contained promises. More information would come if they kept the secret, technology that could solve humanity's problems, and an eventual place in a galactic community of intelligences. On September 21st, the vote that would seal the team's fate took place. Gathered in the observatory's conference room, the 9 scientists debated what to do with the discovery of the century. Mendoza and Espinosa, the most experienced, argued for caution, for studying the implications further before revealing anything. But the younger members, led by the idealistic Maria Elena Rojas, argued passionately that humanity had a right to know, that hiding this knowledge would make them complicit with the same power structures that had always monopolized information. The vote was 7-2 in favor of going public. They immediately began preparing a paper for Nature. carefully drafting every word, preparing the supporting data, the recordings, the spectral analyses. They planned a simultaneous press conference in Mexico City and an online publication to prevent a crackdown. It would be the biggest news in human history, and it would come from Mexico. On September 22nd, everything changed. At 6 a.m., the observatory's computer systems were compromised. Messages appeared on every screen. Silence protocol activated. Cease all activity immediately. The phones went dead. The internet was cut off. When Jose Luis tried to drive down the access road to get help, he found it blocked by what looked like a rock slide, but one that had clearly been caused by explosives. They were completely isolated. That night, unmarked vehicles surrounded the observatory. Mendoza's journal describes in chilling detail the arrival of men dressed in black, some clearly American, others with Russian accents, and some who spoke languages he couldn't identify. Their leader, a man who introduced himself as Colonel Smith, obviously a pseudonym, was direct. They knew everything about the signal, the contact, the plans for publication. They were there to shut it all down. 9 Mexican scientists made the greatest discovery in history and paid for it with their lives. If you believe governments are hiding extraterrestrial evidence, share this video. Comment if you've seen unexplained phenomena. This journal proves everything. The early morning of September 23rd marked the beginning of the Mexican team's desperate resistance. Mendoza tried to negotiate with Colonel Smith, proposing they share the data with the international community in a controlled manner, establish a joint study committee, anything to preserve both the discovery and their lives. Smith was brutally clear in his response. The signal had never existed, they had never detected it, and they would forget everything they had learned. They were offered substantial bribes, bank accounts in tax havens, prestigious positions at foreign universities, new identities if they cooperated. When that didn't work, the threats became personal. They had complete files on each of them. They knew where their families lived. They knew every secret and every vulnerability. Carmen Espinosa was the first to make a desperate move. Taking advantage of a moment when the guards were distracted, she managed to reach her office and connect an old 14.4K modem to the emergency phone line, which was still working. She began transmitting the signal data to colleagues at UNAM. A trickle of information that should have taken hours to complete was dictated in minutes. Agents stormed the facility, smashing equipment and dragging her away for an interview in the basement of the main building. Jose Luis Hernandez attempted a physical escape. He knew every path and trail around the observatory, every corner where the vegetation grew thickest. At 3 a.m. on September 23rd, with physical copies of the most critical data wrapped in plastic and hidden beneath his clothes, he tried to slip through the forest toward San Andres Cholula. He didn't make it 100 meters. The agents had night vision gear and captured him with ease. His attempt to physically preserve the discovery was thwarted with military precision. One by one, the 9 scientists were subjected to individual interviews. Mendoza's journal, hastily written in the few hours he had left, describes the screams that echoed from the basement, the shattered faces of his colleagues as they returned. Patricia Lopez came back in a catatonic state, unable to speak for hours. Roberto Salinas returned with crudely bandaged, clearly broken fingers. They never specified what exactly had been done to them, but they all signed the documents. Confessions of scientific fraud, admissions of embezzling funds, declarations that they had falsified all of Project Quetzal's data to secure more financing. The confessions were engineered not only to discredit the discovery, but to utterly annihilate their reputations. They included admissions of inappropriate conduct with students, falsification of academic credentials, even ties to drug trafficking. Each confession was perfectly tailored to destroy not just the professional credibility, but the personal character of each scientist. It was a meticulously planned assassination of character. At noon on September 24th, the 9 were gathered in the observatory's main hall. Smith, flanked by agents of multiple nationalities, explained what Mendoza called in his diary the horrifying truth of the cosmos. Extraterrestrial contact was real, and it had first been established in 1947. A supranational group existed, with no official name but with absolute power on this subject, controlling all information about extraterrestrial life. There were strict protocols, agreements between the major world powers, and a timeline for gradual disclosure that stretched over decades, perhaps centuries. Mexico, with its unauthorized project, had violated these protocols. Third world countries were not permitted to seek independent contact. The punishment for this violation was severe but, according to Smith, necessary to maintain world order. If extraterrestrial contact were revealed without preparation, religions would collapse, economies would plummet, and there would be mass panic. Wars fought over access to alien technology. The supranational group saw itself as the guardian of human stability. They were given 2 final options. The first was death, made to look like an accident, a fire at the observatory, a collective vehicle crash. The second was a voluntary disappearance. They would be given new identities but would work for the rest of their lives in secret facilities, their knowledge exploited by the group, but without freedom or any contact with their loved ones. Mendoza attempted one last desperate negotiation. He proposed that the team work for them voluntarily, studying the signals under supervision, contributing to the knowledge while maintaining the secret. Smith laughed at the proposal. His response, recorded word for word in the journal, was ruthlessly racist and revealing. "We don't entrust cosmic secrets to third world scientists. You've already proven you can't handle this responsibility. Lesser races lack the maturity for this knowledge." It was in that moment that Mendoza understood. There was no negotiation possible. They were not seen as scientists, but as ethnic threats to an order established by Anglo-Saxon powers. The last entry in the journal, written at 3:00 a.m. on September 25th, is a desperate but meticulous testament. Mendoza knew he had hours, perhaps minutes left. He feverishly wrote down everything he could remember about the signal. The exact coordinates: right ascension, 17 hours, 18 minutes, 5:57 seconds. Declination, 34 degrees, 59 minutes, 23 seconds. The specific frequencies: 1.42 gigahertz with harmonics at 2.84 and 4.26 gigahertz. He detailed the decoding protocols using Fourier transforms, modified with parameters he laid out mathematically. He drew from memory the most important diagrams, the equations he didn't fully comprehend, but knew were revolutionary. Then he wrote personal messages. For his daughter, Alejandra: "Forgive me, my little girl. Your father touched the stars and found they waved back. I did not abandon you by choice. They are taking me because I know too much. You are always my brightest star." For his colleagues, he left instructions on where he had hidden additional copies of the data, places the agents would surely find and destroy, but he had to try. For humanity, he left a warning that cosmic knowledge was being monopolized by a select few and that we all deserve to know the truth. Mendoza hid the journal where he knew it would eventually be found, but not immediately. The compartment behind the Schmidt telescope's instrumentation panel would require major maintenance to be discovered, something that, according to the maintenance schedules, would happen in 25 to 30 years. He wrapped the journal in every layer of plastic he could find, sealed it tightly, and placed it there with the hope that one day, when suppressing the information was more difficult, his testimony would emerge. On the morning of September 26, 1992, the administrative director of the Tonantzintla Observatory, who had curiously been on vacation during the critical events, reported to the authorities that the entire Project Quetzal team had abandoned the facility. The official version, rapidly disseminated by national media, painted a picture of corruption and cowardice. 9 scientists had embezzled over 3 million pesos in research funds and, upon being discovered, had fled the country. The planted evidence was professionally convincing. Bank records appeared showing transfers to accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, forged receipts for equipment that was never purchased, plane tickets to various countries: Argentina, Spain, the United States, Canada. There were even fake suicide notes from 2 of the scientists admitting their guilt and shame. The entire setup was designed not only to explain their disappearance, but to completely destroy any posthumous credibility. The families received the cruelest blow. Each was presented with different but equally devastating documentation. Mendoza's daughter, Alejandra, was shown evidence that her father had a second family in Argentina, along with monumental gambling debts, a double life he had hidden for years. They even had forged photos of him with another woman and children. When she insisted it was impossible that she knew her father, they showed her bank statements and signed testimonies. A case so solid that even she began to doubt. The observatory was immediately restructured. New staff were brought in, carefully selected people who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. The Schmidt telescope was upgraded, a process that purged all the modifications the team had made to detect radio signals. New protocols explicitly forbade any unauthorized research. Mentioning Project Quetzal became grounds for immediate, uncompensated dismissal. Fear settled deep within the Mexican astronomical community. Those who had known the disappeared learned not to speak their names. Their contributions were erased from publications, attributed to others, or simply deleted. In less than a year, it was as if they had never existed. All that remained were shattered families and ruined reputations, a brutal reminder of what happened to those who gazed too deeply into the cosmos. The pages of the journal, found in 2024, contained information that challenged everything we believed about our place in the universe. The technical data Mendoza had meticulously recorded were not just numbers and graphs. They were keys to a reality that had been systematically hidden from humanity. The WOW MX92 signal, according to the partial analysis the team had managed to complete, was not a simple radio transmission. It was a compressed data packet using technology centuries, perhaps millennia, ahead of our own. Among the equations and diagrams were principles of physics that transcended the standard model. There were formulas for what appeared to be faster-than-light propulsion, not through wormholes or extra dimensions, but through the direct manipulation of space-time itself. The diagrams showed designs for zero-point energy generators, devices that could extract energy from the quantum vacuum, solving humanity's energy problems forever. But the most disturbing part was not the technology. It was the information about the senders. According to the partial decoding notes, the civilization called themselves the Orion Watchers, though Mendoza noted this was likely a rough translation of a more complex concept. They had been observing the development of emerging civilizations in the galaxy for millennia. Earth was in what they called an evaluation period, a phase where they determined if a species was fit to join the galactic community, or if it posed a threat that must be contained or eliminated. The contact with the Mexican team had been, according to the decoded messages, a protocol error by a faction of the Watchers who favored an accelerated revelation. Mendoza had deduced something even more terrifying. The major governments of Earth had known about the extraterrestrials for decades. Cross-references in the alien messages suggested prior contacts, established agreements, and a protocol of concealment that had been agreed upon by Earth's powers and the visitors. Mexico, by seeking independent contact, had violated these tacit agreements, threatening to destabilize a carefully maintained balance. According to Mendoza's notes, the scientists were likely not dead. Instead, they were imprisoned in a gilded cage, relocated to secret facilities, perhaps in the Nevada desert, forced to work on classified projects, studying recovered alien technology and communicating with extraterrestrial entities under strict supervision, but with no freedom and no contact with the outside world. The journal revealed the sheer magnitude of what humanity had lost. The signal contained solutions to our most pressing problems, medical devices that could cure cancer by directly manipulating cellular DNA, technology to reverse climate change by capturing carbon on a massive scale, food production methods that could end world hunger. But it was all suppressed. The supranational group had decided that the uncontrolled release of this technology would collapse economies based on scarcity, destroy religions that maintained social control, and eliminate the power structures that had governed humanity for millennia. Mendoza's final philosophical reflection was profound. The stars cannot be silenced forever. Cosmic truth is like light. It can be blocked, diverted, delayed, but eventually it finds its way. The 9 of us may not see the dawn of the age of open contact, but with this testimony we plant the seed. Someday humanity will look at the stars not with ignorance, but with the full knowledge that we are not alone, we never were, and that the universe is full of voices waiting to be heard. For centuries, religions championed cosmologies that placed humanity at the very center of divine creation. But behind this veil, a silent consensus held sway. The uncontrolled revelation of extraterrestrial contact would be catastrophic for the established world order. Mexico had been made an example of for attempting to play this carefully controlled game alone. The message to other developing nations was clear. Do not independently seek cosmic knowledge. Advanced astronomy, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, the development of interstellar communication, all of it was the exclusive domain of the established powers. In his journal, Mendoza had identified a chilling pattern of similar incidents across the globe. In 1978, a team of Soviet astronomers at the Special Astrophysical Observatory in the Caucasus detected anomalous signals. 2 weeks later, they all perished in a helicopter crash. In 1986, a group of Japanese researchers from the National Astronomical Observatory reported unusual patterns in deep space radio signals. They vanished during a typhoon that, curiously, affected no one else in their area. In 1990, a South African team working at the South African Astronomical Observatory captured what they described as structured, non-terrestrial transmissions. A wildfire destroyed their facility, and the scientists perished while trying to save their data. The pattern was undeniable: detection of a signal, an attempt at revelation, intervention by a supranational group, the disappearance or death of those involved, the destruction of evidence, and the discrediting of any residual information. Tonantzintla had been just another node in this global network of suppression. Another group of brilliant minds silenced for touching forbidden truths. But the most disturbing revelation in the journal was this. The WUO MX92 signal never stopped. According to Mendoza's calculations, every 6 hours, like a cosmic clock, alien information bathed the Earth from Gliese 667c. Yet every major radio telescope in the world had been programmed with automatic filters, erasing that specific frequency. The analysis software itself contained routines that deleted the data before any human eye could ever see it. It was an automated cosmic censorship, invisible even to the astronomers operating the equipment. Mendoza had predicted in his journal that the secret could not be kept indefinitely. The democratization of technology, the proliferation of amateur radio telescopes, the rise of artificial intelligence capable of detecting hidden patterns, all of it, he argued, would eventually make total control of information impossible. He estimated that within 30 to 40 years from 1992, sometime between 2022 and 2032, the truth would inevitably emerge. The discovery of his journal in 2024, precisely 32 years later, seemed to fulfill his prophecy. The implications for the present day were staggering. If the journal was genuine, and the experts who analyzed it insisted it was, it meant that while humanity struggled with energy crises, climate change, pandemics, and wars, alien technology that could solve all these problems was being actively suppressed. It meant that governments were in regular communication with extraterrestrial entities while publicly denying their existence or dismissing it as fantasy. It meant that brilliant scientists were living as prisoners in secret facilities, their minds exploited while their very identities had been erased. The cosmic truth had been stolen from humanity by an elite who decided our destiny. Share this to demand full disclosure on extraterrestrial contact. How many geniuses have been silenced? Comment, and let the cosmic truth be set free. Before the authorities could intercept and suppress it, Dr. Eduardo Mendoza Villareal's journal was leaked to independent media. Within hours, scanned pages circulated across the internet, translated into dozens of languages and analyzed by experts worldwide. The Mexican government's reaction was predictable. They called it an elaborate forgery, a disinformation campaign designed to destabilize public trust in scientific institutions. But forensic experts told a different story. The paper was a perfect match for lab notebooks used in Mexico in 1992. The ink showed degradation consistent with 32 years of aging. The handwriting was confirmed as Mendoza's by graphologists who compared it to handwritten academic papers from university archives. The equations, though advanced, were mathematically sound. The celestial coordinates corresponded precisely to Gliese 667c. Everything pointed to authenticity. The most emotional reaction came from Alejandra Mendoza, now a 64-year-old oncologist. For 32 years, she had lived with the shame and pain of believing her father had abandoned her for greed and a secret life. Now, reading his final words, she understood. Her father had not run away. He had been silenced for touching the infinite. He was not a thief, but a martyr for cosmic truth. With tears in her eyes, she told the press, "My father always said the stars held secrets that would change everything. Now I know he found those secrets and paid the ultimate price for trying to share them with humanity." The Tonantzintla Observatory became a strange place of pilgrimage. People arrived hoping to feel something, a connection to the cosmos, an echo of the signal that had cost 9 lives. The Schmidt telescope, now under constant government surveillance, continued to operate. But the astronomers who worked there reported an oppressive atmosphere, as if the building itself held the trauma of what had happened. Inspired by the journal, a few brave astronomers began discreetly pointing their instruments toward Gliese 667c during the hours Mendoza specified. Several reported anomalies, patterns that shouldn't be there. But when they tried to record them, their equipment would mysteriously fail, the data would corrupt, or they would receive visits from government inspectors who conveniently found security violations requiring a temporary shutdown. The journal had opened a crack in the wall of secrecy, but the forces that had silenced the 9 scientists were still active. Journalists who dug too deep found their computers hacked, their sources intimidated, their editors pressured to drop the story. Websites hosting the full journal suffered massive DDoS attacks. Social media platforms flagged posts on the topic as false information without providing any evidence. But the seed had been planted. In universities across the world, astronomy students read the journal in secret, memorizing the frequencies, studying the equations. Amateur radio operators built receivers specifically tuned to the WUAU MX92 signal. Hackers attempted to breach the systems of major radio telescopes to disable the automatic filters. The truth, as Mendoza had predicted, was like water. It always finds a crack to seep through. On clear nights over Tonantzintla, when the wind blows from Popocatépetl and the stars shine with exceptional clarity, some say you can still feel the presence of the 9 scientists. Not as ghosts, but as cosmic echoes, vibrations in the fabric of space-time, where they touched something greater than humanity itself. The Schmidt telescope, a silent witness to a suppressed truth, continues its vigil, waiting for the day it can once again listen freely to the voices of the stars. Dr. Eduardo Mendoza's journal, hidden for 32 years in the heart of the very telescope that captured cosmic voices, confirmed that 9 Mexican scientists did not flee as thieves. They were disappeared for discovering that we are not alone in the universe, that the extraterrestrial truth is monopolized by earthly powers, and that those who dare to share the stars with humanity are condemned to become cosmic dust, silenced like the dark spaces between galaxies that hold secrets we are not allowed to know. This story could change everything we believe about our place in the universe. If you demand total transparency about extraterrestrial life, subscribe now. Activate all notifications. Comment to support alien revelation. Share this with everyone you know. The truth is out there. This is your channel for censored cosmic truths because the universe does not belong to the elites. It belongs to all of humanity. We'll see you on Friday. And remember, we are not alone. We are only made to believe we are.